Hi, today I was initially going to make a video talking about the worst designed Survivor perks as a follow-up to my last rant video, but then I realized playing Survivor is really boring, and I don't care to get the footage for that right now, and I'm also not nearly as interested in their perks as I am killer perks. So instead, I am going to do the unthinkable today. This might be something that gets me in a ton of trouble, but today I am going to try and praise Behavior Interactive. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to do my best. Before we get started though, I'm going to try and lay down some criteria for what I think makes a perk well designed. Number 1, does it disproportionately affect killers? If no, this isn't really a factor, but if it does, that's fine so long as it doesn't help the higher tier killers like Nurse more than the lower tier ones like Trapper. Hopefully this will make a bit more sense when we get to my first pick. Number 2, does it encourage healthy or engaging gameplay? By this I mean things like, it's not 4-man slugging encouraging, it doesn't encourage tunneling aggressively off the first hook, just generally what you would associate with gameplay that's considered to be fun for both sides in general. This varies a lot from perk to perk, but an example could be like how, if there is Enduring in play, you might play around pallets a little differently both as killer and survivor, and this shakes up the gameplay in a way that's not necessarily detrimental for either side, but can give the killer a bit of fun if they catch you off guard with it. An example of a perk that I find to be unengaging would be something like Forced Penance on Twins, because it slows the game down and discourages uncoordinated teams from even trying to work together, which is the only way you'll ever be an even half-decent Twins player. Number 3, does it feel good? This is obviously very subjective, but there are 2 perks on my top 5 that are largely here for this reason, so hopefully what I find to be satisfying becomes a bit clearer as we go. And lastly, for number 4, are the last 3 reasons that I just gave due to some fundamental part of the perk's philosophy, or is it just an issue with the numbers of the perk? If the perk can be made better or worse in terms of how well designed it is, just by numbers being tweaked, that isn't really due to its design so much as it is just it's undertuned or overstated. So it's not nearly as much of a consideration for this video in particular, though it is obviously still important. But that's enough delaying, let's get started. In its current state, I think Corrupt Intervention is actually quite healthy for DBD, mostly for the first reason I gave in the intro. Now I know that sounds bad, seeing as every Nurse, Ghoul, Blight, all the top tiers love to fucking slap this perk on with Pain Res, Grim, and Deadmans, but let's think about how much of that annoyance from those games is actually owed to Corrupt Intervention. Thanks to it shutting off whenever a survivor is down, it's actually not that impactful for most of the high tier killers. Nurse, Blight, Kaneki, Spirit, Dracula, all should already be downing you quickly, so they're likely only going to get a minute at the absolute max out of this perk, and that's assuming like it's a good map for survivor, maybe it's really big, you had a decent first chase, or your teammate had a decent first chase, and they didn't like find you immediately, they're not running like lethal or anything, which they probably wouldn't be if they had corrupt. Meanwhile, lower tier killers are just those who normally really struggle in the early game because they need to take time to build up their power, massively benefit from this perk, and it genuinely makes them feel like an entire tier higher without also making Nurse feel significantly stronger. Is it still a good pick on many high tiers? Yeah, of course, especially on Oni or Singularity who either need setup or simply start without a power, but not nearly as much as someone like Myers, like Trapper, Ghostface, Hag, you get the idea. Corrupt makes me reach for lower tier killers more often, and I think that alone demonstrates that it's a well-designed perk. This perk also has a fun interaction with Plot Twist where it gets disabled if a person with no mither instantly downs themselves, and normally I'm not the biggest fan of perks that are specifically countered by others, like I think Distortion is kinda lame for that reason, but like, if you're running a perk as strong as Corrupt, and you complain about someone running No Mither and Plot Twist, I really don't know what to tell you, man. Go play some Stardew or something. It's not that serious. It's fucking No Mither, Plot Twist. Also, I saw some talk online a while ago about making a weaker version of Corrupt Intervention base kit, and I think it's an interesting idea with some merit, but I really don't think it's ever going to happen for several really, honestly, pretty good reasons. 1, Lethal becomes a perk that's pretty much never worth running, which is so sad because I love Lethal Pursuer. 2, Corrupt Intervention itself would likely need reworked. And 3, this would be a buff to all killers, which I don't think we should be doing. I don't think killers like Nurse need to have base kit Corrupt. And the alternative to this is that Behavior implements buffs that are specific to each killer, so like maybe Trapper gets a better version of it than Nurse. And I also don't trust Behavior to do that properly. So it's a neat idea, and while I do think making more abilities base kit can be fun when done properly, like for example the Borrowed Time base kit is obviously huge and a great change, Behavior lately though has been notoriously bad about doing that, and the possibility of making Nurse even stronger scares me too much for me to want to advocate for a change like this. For number 4, I have picked No Way Out, which I believe is a perk with 2 key healthy aspects to it. Number 1, it rewards the killer for hooking all survivors, and number 2, it helps the killer capitalize on the pressure they've built up for the endgame by both giving you information and more time to work with. But, unlike most other endgame oriented perks like things like Remember Me, Haywire, No-Ed, Terminus, it still requires the killer to play well, and there's like much more the survivors can do about it than those other perks. I feel like, honestly, No Way Out is one of the only well-designed endgame perks. But there's honestly not much else to it beyond that. Another point I could give it is that unlike perks that encourage you to play nice like Pain Res or Grim Embrace, No Way Out has slightly more interesting counterplay, and that if you see a killer has hooked everyone once and you can afford to do so, having one survivor instantly touch a gate after the generators pop, even if it otherwise wouldn't be optimal to do so if this perk wasn't in play, does shake up your approach to endgame a bit. It's kind of like a passive deterrence, kind of like how you might fear survivors have Unbreakable. This similarly makes you want to touch gates sooner just because you're worried this perk is in play. It also encourages altruism on the survivor's end because, like, what else are you going to do for the minute while you wait for the gates to become available to open? You're just going to heal and try and take hits, and I think that's when the game is most fun. Like, frantic endgame scenarios are like peak DBD to me. That being said, there is one thing I would change about No Way Out. I think this perk should just completely shut off in the 1v1 once the hatch has been closed. If this perk is in play in that scenario, you automatically win as killer. It's just going to be even more delayed by like another 2 minutes maybe. And there's basically nothing the survivor can do at that point. They're just trying to like stealth it out, which oftentimes means even more waiting on your end. And this isn't fun for either side, especially considering that if you're in this scenario, as killer, you've already won. If you're like right now shaking your fist at the screen saying, oh, but then I just have a dead perk that gets no value. I deserve that 4th kill. Damn you, Cameron. Politely shut the fuck up. The increasingly common mentality of needing to get that 4th kill is painstakingly unfun for survivors to deal with, and it's honestly boring to execute as killer. I don't get why so many people are hyper-fixated on it. Removing any and all agency from either side is never a good thing, and while No Way Out normally doesn't do this, its 1v1 application does, and I think it should just completely be disabled once there's only one survivor left. If you have 3 kills, you've won, congrats. I'm not saying you have to play super nice and give the last guy hatch or anything. If you find the hatch before me, by all means go ahead and close it, but I think perks shouldn't encourage the I must get 4 kills mindset. And I'm now realizing that this rant about a potential change to the perk is longer than the part actually talking about why it's well designed. But seeing as this entire portion can be shortened down to, it's great, just make it shut off in the 1v1, I think it's still fine being on this list. It's also not a huge deal because, like I said, if you're in this scenario, you've already won as killer, so the perk doesn't determine the outcome of the match in an unhealthy way. It's just kind of extending it, which is annoying, but not a huge deal. For number 3, I've picked Forever Entwined. You know how I said 2 of the perks in the top 5 were here largely because of just how good they feel to use? Well, my second place pick I think has a lot more merit behind it, but yeah, this one's mostly just here because it feels so good, and I am very, very biased towards perks that scale throughout the game. Without my biases, this perk probably shouldn't be here at all, but I am still going to list out all the reasons why I love it anyways. Hopefully this makes telling me how wrong I am in the comments easier. 1. For some reason, my tiny malfunctioning lizard brain loves the noise that plays when you gain a stack. 2. I really like perks that scale over time as you do more and more chasing as killer. 3. Unlike Lightborn, where there's no counterplay and I hate it, if you know that this perk is in play, you can adjust your timings accordingly. And this perk affects palette saves, another reason why Lightborn is inferior and stupid and I hate it. 4. This is one of those perks that consistently gets little bits of value in every game, but every once in a while absolutely saves you and catches survivors off guard. It's not like coup de grace where congrats, the chase you were doing super well in as survivor just got cut so much shorter because your teammates were nice and were doing the correct survivor objective. Instead, it rewards the killer when they do their objective with a nice little bit of convenience in the occasional exciting turning point in the match where a save could go wrong and it doesn't feel like you just got bullshitted. Behavior, and the very unlikely chance that you're listening, please buff this perk to 5% per stack. I love it so much, and I just want to see it in more of my games, and I think a tiny buff wouldn't make it anywhere near overpowered, but would just make it that much nicer. My number 2 pick is probably going to be the least surprising of them all, but I think Save the Best for Last is a fantastically designed perk and checks every single box I mentioned at the start super well, with 1 or 2 tiny caveats that I'll get to in a minute. To start, this perk does disproportionately affect the killer roster, but most of the M1 killers who benefit from this perk are lower tier characters, and this perk doesn't really benefit the higher tiers like Nurse or Blight, so it nicely helps the lower tiers catch up in terms of chase potential, so that's not an issue there. Save the Best for Last also encourages fun and or engaging gameplay interactions on both sides by introducing the stack management minigame that just completely doesn't exist without it. As killer, obviously you just want to know when it is and isn't worth going for the obsession, but there's also potential counterplay from the survivors that I find to be quite fun to both deal with and execute. If survivors see that the perk is in play, they can send the obsession to take hits for other people, and each time the obsession gets hit, it should effectively undo an entire chase's worth of stacks, assuming that each chase takes 2 stacks, which isn't always the case, but generally speaking it is. I find this to be fun to both execute and deal with, like I said, because mostly it just encourages altruism, and as I've said multiple times, both in this video and the last one, I strongly believe that the game is at its most engaging when survivors are playing altruistically and trying to help each other out with body blocks and the like. I also think that the fact that the perk loses the ability to gain stacks during endgame is absolutely perfect and what really seals it as one of the best designed perks Behavior has made. Before, you'd pretty much always want to leave the guy on hook if you knew the killer had stacks of Stabiffle, but with this change, you just want to send in the obsession a couple times to take a hit and then recover it to set up for a save. This gives both sides more chances to make game-changing plays and just puts more killer-survivor interactions into each match. For the third point I brought up into the intro, of just how good does the perk feel, yeah, the perk obviously feels fantastic once you get decent at target prioritization, and that's just a no-brainer. And yes, all of these upsides of Stabiffle are by design, in my opinion, not due to just numbers, and we kinda know this because Stabiffle used to have a higher percentage per stack of I believe 5, and it felt good then, and even with the lower percentage it still feels good. I don't think it's an issue of numbers, I think it really does just work due to the idea behind it. Now, initially I had saved the best for last at number 1, but I do think there's one caveat that kind of holds it back just a little bit for me, and it's not super common, but it is at least worth talking about, I think. And that issue comes to when a survivor team has 3 good players and 1 bad player, and that player is the obsession. 2 things can happen, and again, not likely, but they are still possible. 1, the killer, seeing that the obsession is the worst player, decides to tunnel them and completely ignores trying to play around Stabiffle. That's not really a huge issue with the perk so much as its playstyles, but the second possibility is that the bad player hides and plays super selfishly so that the killer just has 8 stacks the entire game, and the stack management minigame never gets to happen for either side, and the rest of the team is just at a huge disadvantage in chase because one player is being a dick. This is also an issue with playstyles, but it's something that the perk enables even further. So again, both of these are rare, but I felt that they were at least worth mentioning. And now for what I believe to be the best designed killer perk in Dead by Daylight, we have Thrilling Tremors. In terms of just its concept, Thrilling might be the most unique and interesting perk in Dead by Daylight to me. It's 1 part information, 1 part gen blocking, and in my opinion, the information is generally more impactful, but it's kinda hard to tell exactly how much value you get out of the blockage in a lot of scenarios, so maybe that's just because I'm slow. The information obviously comes from knowing what generators to worry about based on whether or not they're being worked on actively, and that sounds pretty simple, but really what other perk in Dead by Daylight is like Thrilling Tremors in the way it conveys information to you? Deadman's is the closest I can think of, and it's honestly probably a stronger perk, but you usually already knew what generator needed pressuring when DMS gets value because against good players, you'll either have to pressure them with like a ranged projectile, or you'll have to manually go over them yourselves, so you already kind of know what gen needs pressured, and that's not really an info perk at that point. Thrilling helps you to both figure out where to go next and gives you a bit of blockage. I swear this perk isn't solely on this list because it's unique though. Surprisingly, despite its strange hybrid design, it pairs very nicely with a lot of other decent killer perks. As an example, it pairs super well with Pain Resonance, another popular perk that I'm also quite fond of. If you pick up a survivor and you see that all the generators are blocked, then congrats, you likely aren't in any immediate danger of a generator popping before you can make it there, so you can afford to hook on a normal, non-scourge hook if that's better for you. But, as a survivor, if you see this is happening, you can also counter it by having everyone else get off the gens so that they get blocked, and having one person stay on the lowest progress gen to have the pain res go to the gen of your choosing. This way, you're still getting perk value by slowing down the other survivors because they do still have to get off their gens for this to work, but they also have a tiny bit of agency in how your perks get used, which I think is super interesting. It also pairs very well with Deadman's Switch because normally DMS struggles with aware survivors knowing to get off gens when someone is being put on the pain res hook. With this perk, you should know what generators need pressured so you yourself can get them off the generator and guarantee Deadman's Switch value. I also like this perk with Awakened Awareness because let's say all the generators are blocked so you don't really know what to do. Well, chances are that means that there are one or several survivors enraged for Awakened Awareness to get value. And lastly, Thrilling also of course works super nicely with perks like Forever Entwined and Agitation that allow you to pick up and carry and hook faster so that you could sooner capitalize on the information of Thrilling because 16 seconds isn't super long. Its unique non-aura dependent information also means that it works on killers who I don't normally want to run too many information perks on. What I mean is killers like Twins, Knight, Spirit, and Dracula. Those are at least the 4 that come to mind, where when you're using their power, especially for mobility, you can't see auras, so oftentimes information perks get a lot less value on them, but because this is an aura dependent, it still works on these killers, and in fact, Twins, Knight, and Dracula are some of the best users of this perk, I would argue. It also comes with the cute little trade-off of, yeah, I can't see auras, so I get a little less precise information, but it also can't be countered by survivors running Distortion, which is a perk I really dislike. The one point you could kinda knock against Thrilling is that higher tier killers typically have higher mobility, and so they might benefit from it a good chunk more than lower tier killers, just because people are more likely to flee nearby generators sooner against them out of fear of a snowball, so the generator blockage information you get from it might be more precise and more frequent in value on someone like Blight than someone like Trapper, just a lower tier killer, but it's still really good on many lower tier killers. In fact, Doctor, a killer that I, as well as many other people, consider to be not very good, loves this perk. If you Static Blast before picking someone up, survivors are likely to either 1. Be completely forced off the generator because of madness, or 2. They'll get scared of you potentially coming for them. In both scenarios, you get generator blockage value. The one thing I might change about Thrilling is just the cooldown. The perk is already quite good, so I don't think they should completely get rid of it, but 30 seconds, even though it's been buffed massively from a minute, can still be kinda rough if you're like playing well. Especially consider that in order for it to trigger twice in 30 seconds, you're usually playing well and capitalizing off of either a blunder from the survivors or a great play that you made. I don't feel like this perk should only be able to go off once in those scenarios. The perk isn't particularly strong, it's just decent in my opinion, and I feel like this change would make it a little more comfortable to use without pushing it into the territory of being too strong. That being said, a little trick you can do is, if you have the time and you don't think the survivor is going to wiggle, you could drop them at the hook for just a second to wait for Thrilling to come back and then still get the information if you have the time to do so. I still love the perk though, and I think it's very serviceable even if they keep the cooldown the way it is. I can't recommend it enough. The build you're seeing on screen is my favorite build both for this perk as well as just my favorite build in the entire game right now, but as I said, you can combine kind of any of the perks I mentioned in this section. You can run Thrilling Tremors with Forever Entwined, Agitation, Pain Resonance, Deadman's, Awakened Awareness, or even just other perks you're comfortable with. It's surprisingly flexible. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think to be the best designed killer perk or perks, or if you think me putting Forever Entwined on here single-handedly invalidates everything I've ever said. I'd also like to quickly say thanks for all the kind words and support on the last rant video. I had a lot of fun discussing stuff with you guys in the comments. That's enough from me though, so have a nice day.